I speak 9 languages, the black girl said proudly. The millionaire laughed, but was left in shock. Rick Sullivan burst out laughing just as the 12-year-old girl lifted her chin and declared clearly, "I speak 9 languages fluently." His laugh, harsh and metallic, echoed across the black marble-clad office on the 52nd floor of Sullivan Tech headquarters, overlooking Manhattan like a river of stars. Rick tilted his wrist slightly so that his $80,000 Patek Philippe caught the light, a reminder to everyone that he stood above them. The walls were lined with paintings worth more than entire blocks of houses. Beneath his feet, the carpet swallowed footsteps whole. "Send them in," Rick said into the gold-plated intercom. The secretary's voice replied, "Carmen Johnson and her daughter are here to clean." The glass doors slid open. Carmen pushed the supply cart, her dark blue uniform neat and pressed. Beside her was Lucia Johnson, a thin black girl with a worn but spotless school backpack and shoes polished to a shine. Lucia looked around for more than a second, measuring the place where her mother had worked for 8 years but had never been allowed to truly see. Rick circled them like a shark, smelling fear. "Carmen," he sneered, 8 years here, right? What's your education level?" "I finished high school." "Only high school." Rick let out a mocking laugh, his voice cutting. Then, glancing at Lucia, he added with a sly smirk, "And this is the little colored girl learning how to dream big? This isn't the place for people with your skin color to dream, you know." The words seemed casual, but they carried blades hidden in velvet. Carmen lowered her head. She had survived years by making herself small, knowing every brick in this tower absorbed the muffled sighs of workers like her. But today, her daughter stood beside her. Shame didn't flow quietly anymore. It bristled into thorns. Rick fanned out a bundle of yellowed pages. "Let's have some fun. An ancient manuscript I just won at Sotheby's. 5 top translators in the city gave up on it. They called it a linguistic maze. Classical Chinese, Arabic, Sanskrit, ancient Hebrew, Persian, medieval Latin, each section in a different tongue. Hey, little girl, guess what it says?" Lucia looked down. The script meandered like a river, splitting into countless streams. She didn't rush. Rick's eyes glinted. He turned back to Carmen. "You scrub toilets for people smarter than you. Your daughter will end up the same. Intelligence is inherited, you see?" And then, twisting the knife deeper. "And with her skin, climbing these stairs is even harder." Lucia lifted her gaze. Her eyes weren't angry, just steady. "You said the translators couldn't read it," she answered calmly. "Can you?" "I'm a businessman, not a translator." "Then you can't read it either. Yet you mock others for not being able to." She paused a beat, her voice soft but firm. "Money isn't proof of intelligence." Silence. The hum of the air conditioning grew taut like a wire. Rick's face flushed. He snapped back, defensive. "Do public schools teach you to talk back like that? A poor black kid claiming she can read what white PhDs couldn't? Stop deluding yourself." Lucia didn't look away. "I speak 9 languages," she said, as if stating a simple fact. "If you want, I'll try." Rick raised a brow. Carmen's breath caught. She knew her daughter was studious, but 9 languages was another universe. Rick crossed his arms. "List them." Lucia ticked them off on her fingers. "Spanish, native, English, advanced, Mandarin, basic, Arabic, conversational, French, intermediate, Portuguese, fluent, Italian, basic, German, conversational, Russian, basic." Each name pronounced perfectly, her tone crisp as nails driven home. Rick laughed louder, the sound forced to cover a crack in his certainty. "A black public school girl claiming 9 languages? Sounds like clickbait. Proof?" Lucia didn't flinch. The New York Public Library offers free language classes after school. Mr. Ahmed teaches Arabic on Thursdays. He was a literature professor in Damascus. Now he drives a taxi. Mrs. Wang teaches Mandarin on Tuesdays, once head of a department in Beijing. Ms. Maria Rossi teaches Italian on Saturdays. She cleans houses by day, volunteers at night. They're not rich, but they're rich in knowledge. I studied through books, apps, people. Anyone can learn if given respect and opportunity. Carmen's grip on the cart tightened, then eased. For the first time, she saw her daughter's path not as a shadowed alley, but as a road paved with persistence and community. Rick glanced at the manuscript, his mocking grin faltering, as though someone had tapped a crack in his glass confidence. "Go on, then?" His voice was quieter, chin flicking toward the pages. Lucia drew a deep breath. She laid her warm palms on the brittle paper and began to read. The air shifted. Classical Chinese fell from her lips in sharp, luminous strokes, then ancient Arabic, flowing, melodic, curling like a carpet's pattern. Sanskrit followed, syllables heavy with seed-like weight. Ancient Hebrew, Persian, medieval Latin, each tongue distinct, yet the meaning wove seamlessly like a river coursing through many lands. Rick's jaw dropped, then snapped shut, like a fish lifted from cold water. His office had never witnessed power manifest like this, not the whip of wealth, but the wings of knowledge. Carmen's hand rose to her chest, eyes brimming. Her daughter, the child who once did homework under a flickering bulb, was now speaking to the world from heights Carmen had never dared to imagine. Lucia looked up, her voice still steady. "Shall I translate the meaning for you?" Rick couldn't argue any more. A single yes slipped out. Not from his ego, but from a part of him long buried. "The manuscript speaks of the nature of wisdom and wealth," Lucia began. "True wisdom isn't found in gilded palaces, but in a humble heart. True wealth isn't counted in money, but in the ability to see dignity in every person. True power doesn't humiliate, it lifts others up." She stopped a moment. The words weren't loud, but they struck exactly where Rick had hidden his mirror all these years. For an instant, he wanted to retort, with jargon, charts, numbers, but suddenly those things shrank to ants scurrying in circles. Before him stood a black girl who spoke 9 languages, read 6 ancient scripts, and didn't flinch at power. And he, a man who had bought what he didn't need just to hear money ring, felt empty. I'm sorry," Rick muttered, startled by his own voice. The 3 words fell like lead on marble. Carmen looked up. In 8 years, no one on the 52nd floor had ever said sorry to her. But Lucia only shook her head slightly. Words aren't enough. Actions matter. She met Rick's gaze. "If you truly want to change, I'll set the condition. But that comes after I finish translating." And so, on the 52nd floor of Manhattan, the opening strike of a rich man was overturned by the knowledge of a child. The rules of the game had shifted. The one in control, at least in this room, was no longer the man behind the stone desk, but the girl standing by the manuscript, her hands steady and unshaken. Lucia translated each layer of meaning, unhurried, as if unlocking a chest with 3 locks. "The first layer," she said, "is instruction. Whoever thinks they are above others because of money is the poorest of all, for they've lost the ability to see light in others. Whoever uses power to belittle others is weak, for they need others to shrink just to stand tall." Rick pressed his hand on the edge of the stone desk. His fingers stiffened. The cold surface no longer gave him the safety it once had. A familiar voice in his head urged, "Argue, push back, twist the logic." But here, Logic was no longer something he could buy. It was truth resounding through many tongues. The second layer, Lucia continued, is metaphor. The text uses a river to describe language. Water changes name and color as it flows through each land, yet it remains water. People change skin color, jobs, bank accounts, yet they remain human. Their dignity does not change. She stopped and looked straight at Rick as she said the word dignity. Carmen drew a sharp breath. She knew these truths in her bones, being called the wrong name, being ordered to work faster than a machine, being seen as a tool. But today, hearing her daughter say dignity, she felt a door open in her chest, a door she had kept locked for years just to keep going. The third layer, Lucia placed her hand on the final page, is choice. When the powerful realize they have been blind to the wisdom around them, that is the moment they begin to awaken or condemn themselves. Rick swallowed hard. The word condemn fell like a stone into a deep well. He looked around. The expensive paintings, the chandelier, the glass walls, all suddenly resembled a collection of golden handcuffs. He turned toward Carmen. For the first time, he saw not the uniform, but the face of a mother who had stood through countless weary nights. "I was wrong," Rick admitted. But Lucia gently cut in, "I have 3 conditions. If you truly learned today's lesson, fulfilling them will make your apology real." Rick nodded, accepting the new rule. Power was not in shouting, but in submitting to moral discipline. 1, Lucia raised a finger, you apologize to my mother, not just for today, but for 8 years of treating her like she was invisible. Say her full name, Carmen Johnson. Look her in the eyes when you do. Rick turned, facing Carmen. "Carmen Johnson," he said slowly. "I'm sorry for not seeing you as a person. I'm sorry for humiliating you in front of your daughter. I'm sorry for never once asking about your life." His voice broke slightly on the word person. Carmen stood tall, not to forgive immediately, but to acknowledge this moment as real. The man who once didn't know her name was now learning to say it right. 2, Lucia continued, you use your power the right way. Scholarships for students from working families, with priority to marginalized communities. Funding free language programs at the public library. Creating real career paths for service workers in your company, so hidden talent can step into the light. Rick listened without protest. Instead of asking, "What's the ROI?" he asked, "How many scholarships to begin with would make it honest to the responsibility?" 150, Lucia answered firmly. Not a PR number, but enough to carry a whole class of students, large enough to bind you to ongoing action. 3, she raised her last finger. You learn a new language, so you'll know the feeling of starting from zero. Every Tuesday after work, you go to the New York Public Library. I'll teach you Mandarin. No VIP rooms, no glass chairs, just wooden tables and pencils. You attend like everyone else. Rick gave a faint laugh, not mocking, but a soft shame, remembering he had ridiculed the idea just minutes ago. Agreed, he said. I'll be there on Tuesday. Lucia nodded. She didn't shake hands yet. She looked into his eyes, searching for sincerity. Rick didn't look away. He had avoided too much in his life already. "And the manuscript? Do you want to hear the conclusion?" Lucia asked. Rick nodded. The final passage, Lucia read aloud. "The richest person is the one who enriches others. The strongest is the one who helps the weak to stand. The wisest is the one who knows he was once blind." Carmen broke down in tears, not from shame, but from sudden release. The invisible burden of years seemed to lift, as though someone else had finally taken hold of it. Rick turned his gaze to the city outside the glass wall. The streets still pulsed with life. But down there, among stone and lights, was a place he had never set foot, the public library, where his fate had just been rewritten with the chalk of a black girl. "We're done here," Lucia said, closing the manuscript. "See you Tuesday at the library. Bring a notebook with grid lines and a pencil. Homework. Practice the 4 tones. Copy 10 radicals." Rick smiled for the first time that afternoon, a smile without fangs. "Understood." He turned to Carmen. "Thank you, Carmen." Saying someone's name doesn't make you poorer. Sometimes it's the first step to becoming truly rich. As mother and daughter pushed the cart out of the 52nd floor, the thick carpet no longer swallowed the sound of its wheels, perhaps because the room's gravity had shifted. What weighed the most was no longer stone or glass, but the promise a man now had to keep with himself. And Tuesday would come. Pages full of mispronunciations awaited. Scholarship programs had to be built. Eyes from the country club would squint. But today, in the invisible ledger of Rick's life, 3 bullet points had been written in ink that could not be erased. And at the end of the 3rd line was the signature of the youngest teacher he had ever had, Lucia Johnson. The lobby of the New York Public Library smelled of old paper and polished wood. Rick Sullivan stood there with a grid-lined notebook and a pencil he had bought in a rush at the stationery counter. For the first time in years, he had arrived on time without an assistant by his side. His phone rested quietly in his pocket. His eyes drifted over the study tables. An elderly woman teaching her grandson math. A group of high schoolers bent over homework. A few immigrants typing carefully as if afraid the words might slip away. "You came." Lucia Johnson appeared with a backpack heavy with books, her hair tied neatly, a navy hoodie over her shoulders. She didn't bow to power, nor did she act smug in front of someone asking to learn. "Class rules," she said. "No VIPs. Phones on silent. Don't interrupt. Mistakes get corrected, not ridiculed." Rick nodded and put away his phone. Lucia opened her own notebook. On the first page were 4 large tone marks, 1 flat line, 1 rising arrow, 1 dip, then rise, 1 falling stroke. "Ma, ma, ma, ma," she read, her voice clear as glass. Rick repeated after her. "Ma," he said clumsily, the sound crashing onto the wooden table. Lucia smiled, not mocking. "Better than the first time. 3rd time will be smoother. After that, do it again." Sweat gathered on Rick's neck despite the cool air. At the Summit Club, a single mispronunciation would be an excuse for ridicule. Here, mistakes were rungs on a ladder. At the next table, a Middle Eastern man in his 50s gave a slight nod when Rick finally got "ma" right. Lucia introduced him. "This is Dr. Ahmed, my Arabic teacher. He drives a cab by day, teaches letters by night." Rick rose to greet him. He was used to shaking hands with billionaires, but now found himself awkward before a professor without a nameplate. "Good evening, Mr. Sullivan," Ahmed said, his English slow, graceful. "Here, we switch roles. Humility is the common language." The words settled in Rick like a sustained note. Midway through, an older woman with silver hair passed by. "Mrs. Wang," Lucia called. "My student here pronounced ma correctly today." She smiled, her eyes wrinkling warmly. Everyone stumbles at first. What matters is stumbling in the right direction. Rick chuckled. All his life he had climbed by conquest. Today he was being taught how to fall properly. At the end, Lucia assigned homework, 10 radicals, 5 greetings, 20 rounds of the 4 tones. Tuesday, same spot, she reminded him. Wooden table number 12. If you miss, you make it up, not with money. Rick nodded. He looked around the modest room, thinking of the 52nd floor where each chair cost as much as a year's scholarship. The feeling of being allowed to be weak here was strangely safe. The next morning, Rick called an emergency meeting. On the big screen weren't revenue charts but 4 lines: scholarships, library language program, career ladder for service staff, listening circles. The room buzzed. CFO Mark Green frowned. How much will this cost? What's the IME? Shareholders will ask where the profit is. Rick answered without hesitation. 150 full scholarships for students from working families. Long-term funding for 12 library branches. A career path so service employees can shift roles, learn skills, earn certifications. ROI will show in retention, quality, reputation. If you want numbers, measure again in a year. The statement shifted the room. The VP of HR swallowed. Who will lead the project? Rick turned. Carmen Johnson. The room froze, then gasped. Carmen entered, not with cleaning tools but with a notebook. On its cover, naming, listening, fairness, opportunity. She spoke without slides. Respect starts with saying names right. Next step is listening with responsibility. Then we fix processes, contracts, shifts, benefits. Opportunity must come with guidance. A murmur rose in the back. Isn't this favoritism for black staff? Rick heard it. He didn't ignore it. Anyone doubtful can join today's listening circle, he said. Sit at the same table with Carmen and Lucia. Hear their stories before judging the policy. That afternoon, chairs were set in a circle instead of around a stone desk. Software developers, shift managers, security guards, janitors sat as equals. Lucia led with an open question. When have you felt invisible at work? An Indian engineer hesitated, then spoke of being teased for his accent in meetings. A cleaning woman said she had been called the lady for 3 years, never once by her real name. A former team lead shrugged. I didn't mean it. Lucia replied calmly, The issue isn't intent, it's impact. From now on, we use people's names. If you slip, correct it immediately, no excuses. By evening, an anonymous post appeared on the company Slack. Tuesday Mandarin with the janitor's kid, mandatory yet? It wasn't profane, but venomous enough. Rick replied publicly, We don't mandate language learning. We mandate respect. Anyone calling a child the janitor's kid needs to relearn how to speak about people. The message sparked debate. Some thanked him, others muttered, The CEO's too sensitive. Rick didn't delete the arguments. Instead, he scheduled 2 more listening circles. Carmen kept time. Lucia asked questions. Ahmed and Mrs. Wang sat in attendance. By the 3rd session, people understood. This wasn't favoritism, it was correction, bringing the scale back to balance. But pushback came from outside too. A finance blog headlined, Sullivan Tech Goes Woke. CEO learns Mandarin at public library, elevates janitor to management. The comments dripped with racist jabs at skin and intellect. Rick read them all, unflinching. He sent a company-wide email. When you touch injustice, it screams. The screaming is proof you're hitting the right nerve. Keep doing the homework. On Tuesday night, Rick returned to table 12. Lucia checked. Where are the 10 radicals? Rick showed a page dense with strokes. She gave a small nod, enough to make the student want to stay. For an hour, they wrestled with characters. Each time Rick got it right, Mrs. Wang winked from the next table. Each time he stumbled, Ahmed whispered, Slow down. At the end, Lucia instructed, Next week, read a short classical Chinese passage, no transliteration. You'll stumble and get back up many times, that's normal. Rick smiled. Turns out, success has tones too. I've been pronouncing it wrong for years. Lucia, slung on her backpack, tapped Rick's notebook lightly. Tomorrow at the company, there'll still be hard sounds. But if you read one sound right at a time, eventually it becomes a sentence. Night fell over Manhattan. The 52nd floor still glowed, but now, for Rick, the library's lights felt warmer. He realized power isn't lost when you learn to say sorry. It only shifts, away from mocking laughter toward the nods of those who had never been invited to the table. Friday noon at the Summit Club, dark wood paneling, thick velvet drapes, Bordeaux glasses glowing under amber light. Bradley Carter, hedge fund, Sebastian Price, pharmaceuticals, Ethan Cole, telecom, sat around the table, their eyes trained to measure people by stock prices. Rick, Bradley lifted his glass, I hear you're bringing social justice into your company, taking Mandarin classes at the public library, and promoting a black janitor to director? Each word snapped open like the lid of a box releasing prejudice. Rick set his glass down. Her name is Carmen Johnson. She leads our people development program, designing real career pathways, and I'm learning Mandarin from my 12-year-old teacher, Lucia Johnson. Sebastian scoffed. Is this PR? Or are you prepping to sell out to Chinese investors? Ethan added, Don't kid yourself. Talent isn't found in basements. Rick didn't flush. 6 weeks ago, he would have laughed along. Today, he spoke steadily. Doctor. Ahmed was once a professor of Arabic literature. Mrs. Wang once chaired a department in Beijing. They teach in libraries because of borders and wars, not because they're lesser. It took me 51 years to see that. Bradley set his glass down with a sharp clink. You're weakening our position. These woke stunts make shareholders uneasy. Rick smiled, without fangs. If shareholders oppose respect and investing in people, maybe Sullivan Tech is no longer the right fit for them. Choose your side, Sebastian said. 1 week, adjust, or you're out of this circle. Rick stood, not mocking. I'll leave right now. You can keep your circle. I have a new one, the library, the classroom, the scholarships. He walked away. Behind him, someone muttered, lunatic, a stone dropping onto carpet with no echo. Monday, quarterly shareholders' meeting. Reports and charts filled the room. Mark Green presented conservative forecasts. A shareholder asked, We hear costs are rising from scholarships and libraries. What about margins? Rick didn't dodge. Yes, costs rose. But turnover rates dropped. Productivity stabilized. Workplace accidents at 2 satellite plants fell 30% after retraining and schedule adjustments. And the applicant pool has doubled because of our reputation. Another shareholder frowned. That's correlation, not causation. Rick nodded, agreed. So, let's test it. 2 units replicate the model, 2 remain unchanged, 6 months of data, I'm betting on people. Mid-session, an aide whispered to Rick. Problem in the lobby. He excused himself. The Lucia Johnson scholarship poster had been defaced with black marker. A crude drawing beside the scrawl, Stay in your lane. No slurs, but the target was clear. Skin color and her mother's work. Security was flustered. Employees murmured. Carmen stood firm, pale but chin high. Lucia arrived seconds later, stopped, stared at the words. She didn't cry. She raised her phone, snapped a photo, then turned to the gathered crowd. We do 2 things. 1, erase it. Filth doesn't get to linger on a wall of opportunity. 2, we don't erase in silence. Rick nodded. He called janitorial staff with cleaning solution and set a portable speaker down. Everyone, he said, his voice steady. "Here we call people by name, and we fix what's wrong. This attack is against Carmen Johnson, against Lucia Johnson, and against anyone who believes education is a right. We don't retaliate, but there are consequences. Camera review, suspension of those responsible, mandatory bias training, and a public apology, if the harmed accept it." A mid-level manager, tense-faced, stepped forward. I did it," he blurted. "I was angry because the company's changing too fast. I didn't mean to insult her skin." Carmen looked at him, not shouting. "Lack of intent doesn't erase impact. I hear your fear of losing ground, but your ground doesn't come from pushing me down." Rick suspended him 3 weeks without pay, required 3 listening sessions, a public apology, and reinstatement only if Carmen and Lucia confirmed they'd heard sincerity. The man nodded, eyes wet. I'm sorry," he said, looking directly at Carmen for the first time. Carmen gave a small nod. "I hear you." The graffiti was scrubbed away on the spot. Rick ordered not to reprint a clean poster yet. Instead, frame the cleaned one with a caption, "Defaced, restored, stains remain to remember." Lucia added, "And list the names of those who scrubbed it. Janitorial crew, front desk staff, and the one who confessed." Heads nodded. Community justice doesn't erase the wrongdoer. It places them in the process. Rick returned upstairs. "Apologies for the pause," he told the shareholders. "A lesson just played out downstairs. It didn't break our business model. It built our trust model." One senior shareholder, silver-haired and cold until now, spoke slowly. "I despise hollow PR, but if you're building a workplace where janitors and engineers resolve crises together, I'll keep my stake for another 3 years." Evening. Rick returned to the library. Lucia opened a new lesson, a short classical Chinese passage. Rick stumbled, tried again, then read it right. "Good," Lucia smiled. "Tomorrow's the first round scholarship interviews. Do you want to sit with the panel?" "Not to grade, just to listen." Rick nodded. "I've spoken too much of my life. Now it's time to hear others' lives." That night, he walked through the 52nd floor. On the walls where million-dollar paintings once hung, now were photos. Ahmed by a chalkboard of Arabic script. Mrs. Wang smiling behind a stack of books. A young Latinx girl clutching her scholarship letter. Carmen at a round-table meeting. Rick dimmed the lights. The atmosphere softened. Downstairs, the faint stain left on the scholarship poster, deliberately not scrubbed away, reminded him that this work would always leave marks. And perhaps keeping a scar to remember was the most necessary thing to prevent returning to days when he thought he stood above others. Before locking up, Rick wrote in his grid notebook, "Learning people's language is harder than learning Mandarin. But mastering both is how you truly read the world." He closed it. Tomorrow, the voices of scholarship applicants would pour into the room like fresh wind, and in the middle of it, a pencil still waited for him to mark the first words of a rewritten life. A temporary interview room was set up in the 6th-floor hall. Folding chairs, plain white tablecloths, paper water cups, handwritten name tags. Carmen Johnson served as coordinator. Beside her sat a blind review panel. 2 young managers, a veteran engineer, Dr. Ahmed, Mrs. Wang, and Lucia, the youngest of all, yet seated at the center of the table. Rick Sullivan only listened, a sheet of paper in front of him with 4 words written by Lucia. "Do not interrupt." The first candidate, Amaya Rivera, Queens, brought a bundle of bilingual poems. "I wrote them while waiting for my mom to finish her shift," she said, fingers nervously touching a cheap necklace. Lucia asked, "When do you feel invisible?" Amaya recalled when a teacher told her, "Your accent is cute," then gave her low marks for having kitchen grammar. Dr. Ahmed asked to read one short poem. The entire panel fell silent. Rick sat still, realizing talent flowed right in front of him, without golden frames. The second candidate, Jamal Carter, Brownsville, carried a robot built from scrap. "I love the subway," Jamal said, eyes glowing. "I want to study rail engineering." When Lucia asked about failure, Jamal grinned. "I once applied for an unpaid internship. They asked me, 'That hoodie, is that the dress code?' I went home, coded a Python simulation of the brake system, sent it back. Next time, they invited me." The third candidate, Noah Higgins, Staten Island, white, with neatly written notes. His father had died in the opioid crisis. "I work at the ferry terminal," he said. "I'm not good at speeches, but I show up on time." Lucia nodded, marking discipline and perseverance. The scholarship wasn't only for one skin color. It sought potential too often overlooked. Midday, a blonde girl entered, Chloe Green, accompanied by her mother. Her resume sparkled: private school, Model UN, European summer camps. Outside the door, CFO Mark Green texted an aide, "Mark this one." Carmen caught the signal but didn't change procedure. Lucia handed out blind review packets, names and zip codes hidden, only essays and proof of effort left visible. Chloe spoke fluently, but when Lucia asked, "When have you felt invisible?" she faltered. "I never thought about that." Grades were perfect, experiences polished, but depth was thin. Her score fell short. During the break, Mark stepped in, voice low. "You're rejecting talent because of bias?" Carmen kept her tone flat. "We're blind reviewing. If she's strong, her file will stand on its own." Mark bristled, but after the listening circles days earlier, he held back. As he turned away, Lucia slid a slip of paper onto the table. "Everyone wants a side door. But fairness is a straight line, not a shortcut." Mark read it, pocketed it, said nothing. 2 days, 327 applications, 220 interviews, distilled into 150 awards. The final list was multicolored: Black, Latinx, Asian, working class white, children of mechanics, nurses, drivers, migrant farmhands. Lucia proposed one binding condition. Each scholarship came with 10 hours per month of give back at the library or in mentoring programs, multiplication by design. The award ceremony was held in the company's auditorium. No giant LED backdrop, just a wooden stage, black curtain, a row of plain microphones. At the entrance, a security guard accidentally told a father in work clothes, "Side doors over there." Carmen appeared just in time. "There's no side door here. Please come through the main hall." The man froze, then smiled in gratitude. Press attended. A reporter asked Rick, "Is this affirmative action 2.0? Rick started to reply but looked to Lucia. She stepped forward. "Equality is giving everyone shoes. Equity is making sure they fit. This scholarship measures the foot first. We review blind, we look for effort, discipline, curiosity, then provide support that matches. No one is chosen for skin color. Everyone is chosen for potential poverty and prejudice usually bury." The room murmured with approval. Rick glanced at Lucia, understanding why on Tuesday nights he had to practice tones, learning to balance sentences as carefully as this. Names were called. Amaya Rivera walked across the stage, her mother crying. Jamal Carter held up his robot. The hall erupted in applause. Noah Higgins whispered, "Thank you," and clutched his envelope like the ferry dock he worked every morning. At the back, Mark Green watched quietly. He remembered his own father had once mopped hospital floors before becoming a shift supervisor. Perhaps, afraid of losing power, he had forgotten his family's old path. He bowed his head, typing a message he never sent. I struck the wrong tone. Afterward, a TV station requested an interview. A reporter asked Lucia, "You're only 12. Why teach a CEO?" Lucia answered, "Because he wanted to learn, and because someone who knows how to say sorry deserves to learn." Rick laughed softly. It was the best PR line he'd ever heard, except it wasn't PR at all. That night, the elevator carried Rick and Carmen down to the lobby. The once defaced scholarship poster now hung in a frame with the caption, "Defaced, repaired, stain kept to remember." Rick paused. "Tomorrow I meet the board. They want harder metrics." Carmen nodded. "We'll bring measurable stories. Reduced turnover in service teams, mentoring hours logged, workers attending night classes at the library, new life paths opened. The metrics of trust are repeated actions." Rick stepped out. Outside, Manhattan air was dry, the lights warm. He realized, among the city's noise, today the silence of the auditorium was the truest sound. The silence after each okay from Lucia, after each scholarship name called. From a bundle of yellowed pages on the 52nd floor, the story had changed shape into a social contract, signed by the trembling hand of a once arrogant man, and the steady script of a girl who knew how to read the world. The Monday morning strategy meeting had no multicolored KPI charts. On the whiteboard, Rick wrote 4 large words: humiliation, education, action, multiplication. "This," he said, "is the diagram I've lived through, and we will run it as a system." Step 1. Humiliation, facing the wound. Carmen led a retelling session for the executive team. Each person wrote down a moment when they had belittled someone, even unintentionally. No excuses. The goal: recognize the habit. Mark Green stood. "I asked to flag an application, Chloe's, because I feared this program would cut out children of our class. I admit I was wrong and will recuse myself from the review panel for 1 year." The room was silent, then clapped. Not to cheer, but to acknowledge someone laying down a weapon. Step 2. Education, structured learning. Lucia, doctor. Ahmed, Mrs. Wong, and HR designed a 3-2-1 module. 3 hours, responsible listening. Say names correctly, ask open questions, respond. Without defensiveness. 2 hours, unconscious bias. Role-play scenarios, analyze impact versus intent. 1 hour, skills of uplift. How to give concrete opportunities. Shadowing, mentoring, micro-grants. No endless slides, real stories led the way. Every manager had to complete it within 30 days. Step 3, action, fixing process. 2 units piloted, 2 stayed as control, as Rick had promised shareholders. In the pilot, Carmen's team redrew the career path for custodial staff. From cleaner, team lead, facility coordinator, safety and operations associate, linked with night classes at the library, basic IT, communication, English, Mandarin, Arabic. Timesheets changed. Study hours logged as development, not lost productivity. Step 4. Multiplication, scaling out. Each employee in the program would mentor 1 scholarship student. Mandatory 1 hour per week. 1 hour times 300 people times 52 weeks equals 15,600 hours, Rick underlined. That's a parallel school. Results, month 2. Pilot units showed 29% fewer cleaning errors, 35% fewer safety violations, and a 12-point jump in internal NPS. Control units showed no change. CFO, Mark, presented himself. I measured it. This isn't PR. Numbers don't lie when measured right. Beyond the company, the library network multiplied. The 12 original branches launched community language hours. Tuesday nights Mandarin. Mrs. Wang trained 6 assistants. Thursday nights Arabic. Ahmed trained 4 former Syrian students. Weekends, a Reading Ancient Texts club coordinated by Lucia, now 13, alongside a volunteer linguistics PhD. Maria Rossi built an Italian-Spanish conversation group for parents, pairing mothers and children to learn together. The seed of family learning took root. Resistance still came. A late-night talk show blared, "Are scholarships favoring minorities leaving middle-class kids behind?" They brought a pundit with cherry-picked numbers. Rick didn't go on air. Instead, the company hosted a public town hall at the library. Scholarship students shared journeys, parents explained shift work, managers outlined new processes. A Jamaican-born worker said, "I learned Excel at night. Last week I submitted my first report. My supervisor praised it." The room erupted in applause. Debate softened before living proof. One snowy evening, Rick sat at table 12, practicing a classical Chinese phrase Lucia gave him, "Jian xian's qi. When you see the wise, think of becoming like them." He stumbled, then got it right. Lucia nodded lightly. "Tomorrow," she said, "you present the 4-step diagram to the whole company. Don't read it off paper, tell it." Rick smiled. "I used to tell revenue stories all day, but telling a story of remorse, I'm still learning." Lucia clasped her hands, joking but piercing. "Every language starts with hello. Every ethic starts with I'm sorry." The next day, the auditorium was packed. Rick held the mic, no teleprompter. He told the story from the 52nd floor to table 12. Humiliation, learning, doing, multiplying, no boasting. He told of mispronounced tones, venomous messages, the defaced poster kept with stains, the tears of parents, each anecdote tied to a specific change. At the end, he said, "I commit 3 years of funding for the 12 library network, expanding to 18, increasing the scholarship fund to follow every student through graduation. This isn't a campaign, it's how we do business." When the lights rose, the board chair stepped on stage. He shook Rick's hand. 3 months ago, I doubted. Today, I vote to expand the pilot. In a year, if results hold, we'll establish a permanent endowment for the program. Rick looked down at the front row. Lucia seated between Ahmed and Mrs. Wang, and nodded like a student receiving a hard new assignment. That night, Rick opened his grid notebook. On a fresh page, he redrew the 4-step diagram and added a looping arrow. At the bottom, he wrote, "Multiplication isn't a one-time act, it's a habit." In the corner, a crooked pencil mark reminded him that stains must be kept to remember direction. Outside, snow piled on the library steps. Inside, the sound of pages turning echoed like the heartbeat of a city learning how to speak to itself again. The New York Public Library was unusually crowded that evening. In the community room, a brown paper banner read in bold marker, "Language Commons, Kong Jong Nyon Eng." At the center stood Lucia Johnson with a black felt-tip pen. Around her were Dr. Ahmed, Mrs. Wang, Maria Rossi, and a group of newly awarded Lucia scholars. Each person pinned a card. What can you teach? What do you want to learn? The lines of handwriting tangled into a living map of study. Jamal signed up to teach basic circuits to neighborhood kids. Amaya planned Friday bilingual poetry nights. Noah offered to monitor ferry schedules and teach Excel to parents. Maria suggested weekend mother-child Italian-Spanish classes. Carmen walked the room, calling each person by name. From being the janitor once upon a time, she had become a cultural architect. At wooden table 12, Rick Sullivan scribbled radicals. Practicing tones, he confused ma with ma, drawing warm laughter from the group. Mrs. Wang nodded. We laugh to learn, not to humiliate. Every laugh tonight seemed to restore something the 52nd floor had once stripped away, the safety to be wrong. Meanwhile, the City Ledger published an op-ed. Don't turn a black child into a PR prop. Does Lucia really speak 9 languages? Underneath, anonymous accounts shouted, prove it before real scholars. No slurs, but the tone was familiar. Velvet skepticism. Phones buzzed across the room. Dr. Ahmed frowned. They want a circus, Mrs. Wang murmured. The library is not a circus. Rick glanced at Lucia. She put her phone down, not snapping back. If they want academic discussion, we set conditions, she said. No live broadcast. No edits. Agreement on purpose. Testing method, not exposing a person. And a commitment. Each scholar must sign a letter supporting the library. Dr. Ahmed nodded. We'll invite colleagues from Columbia, NYU, Right Field, Right Protocol, Mrs. Wang added, and Lucia won't perform alone. This is comparative study. There must be co-readers, co-translators. The next morning, the library director received a discreet letter. Some old donors warning to reconsider lending space for a political show. Polite words, heavy weight. The same day, the Summit Club leaked a rumor. Sullivan using a child to polish his image. Rick read it all, said nothing. He brought the letter into the library boardroom, laying it beside the handwritten venue request Lucia had submitted. The director sighed. Our budget depends, but justice also needs money. Carmen said, the community will raise funds. Lucia added, and Sullivan Tech will cover the hall, without a logo. That night, a special listening circle was held. Lucia stood in the middle of the chairs. I am not a wonder to be ticketed. I will read if conditions ensure knowledge is not turned into spectacle. If not, then no. A parent asked softly, Are you afraid? Lucia smiled thinly. I fear becoming a tool, but language, I love it. Dr. Ahmed scheduled an internal colloquium, inviting 3 scholars, Professor Klein, Ancient Hebrew, Columbia, Dr. Farah, Classical Arabic, NYU, Associate Professor Romano, Medieval Latin, Fordham. They accepted, for the subject and for the library. Conditions, closed to press, only an academic record published later, approved by all 3. The City Ledger refused. Live stream or nothing. Mrs. Wang chuckled. Nothing, then. Late one night, Lucia and Carmen walked home. A strange car slowed, window rolled down, a sneer tossed out. If you're so smart, stay smart in your own house. Then it sped off. Carmen squeezed her daughter's hand. Lucia didn't chase the taillights. From her backpack, she pulled a stiff card she had written, Never turn knowledge into a circus. Read to lift others. Carmen looked at the words, her eyes softening. If you change your mind tomorrow, I'll still be proud. Lucia shook her head. I set the conditions. They agreed, that's enough. The colloquium was set. Saturday, 10 a.m., Hall C of the library. Outside, a protest group registered to gather, demanding transparency. The library coordinated with police to maintain order. Rick stood outside in quiet sponsorship, without speaking. He signed a commitment to cover all security, materials, and ASL interpretation. "This is the House of Language," he told the director. "The doors must stay open." The night before, Lucia sat alone at table 12. She opened the manuscript, not to memorize, but to revisit the river she had crossed. In the margin she wrote, "The real test isn't proving I'm good enough. It's proving this way of learning is open enough for anyone to walk." She folded it shut, turned off the lamp. From the tall window, Manhattan exhaled. Down on the street, wind tapped gently against the signs. Above, morning was already slipping through the edge of the curtain, bringing both the glare of suspicion and the glow of love. Lucia was ready. Not to defeat anyone, but to keep her promise. To read in order to lift. The library opened early. The hallway leading to Hall C carried simple posters. "Language is a bridge. Say each other's names right." Outside, protesters held signs. "Live or it's fake." Inside, 3 scholars quietly examined copies of the manuscript. Faded brown ink, edges frayed like the edges of memory. 10:02. Lucia stepped forward without a microphone, dressed in a white shirt, black pants, sneakers. "I begin with thanks to Dr. Ahmed, to Mrs. Wang, to Maria, to the librarians who opened the rare books cabinet, and to my mother who taught me patience." She invited Professor Klein, Dr. Farah, and Associate Professor Romano to sit at a round table on stage. Today is not a performance but a co-reading. Section 1. Classical Chinese. Lucia read 4 lines. Mrs. Wang read alongside her, explaining rhythm and allusions. Lucia laid out 2 possible interpretations. Professor Klein nodded, noting, "The girl distinguishes well between classical and vernacular Chinese, without confusing the references." Section 2. Classical Arabic. Lucia read, Dr. Ahmed followed, explaining stress and morphology. Dr. Farah asked about textual variants. Lucia pointed to a faint ink mark like an editorial sign. Section 3. Sanskrit. Lucia stumbled half a beat, then found the right Sandy. Professor Romano smiled, tapping his pen. "Correct." She continued through ancient Hebrew, Persian, medieval Latin. Each section read in tandem, explained, then rendered into English and Spanish. At the back, Rick was no longer short of breath. He forgot the time. In the corner, Carmen sat straight, wiping tears with the back of her hand. Not from hurt, but from pure admiration. During Q&A, a man at the back stood without waiting for the mic. "Why must we listen to a child? This is parrot skill. Let adults do adult work." The room fell silent. Lucia didn't flush. She spoke clearly. "I'm not asking for adults' jobs. I am learning from adults and inviting them to learn again from a child's curiosity. If it were parroting, I could not answer about variance and etymology. And if children must wait until we're old enough to be heard, most of us will never be heard." A blogger raised his phone. "Why not live? Afraid?" Dr. Ahmed took the mic. "Scholarship is understanding before reporting. The record will be published with signatures of the 3 scholars. No edits needed?" The scholars nodded. The blogger lowered his phone and sat. Lucia closed the manuscript and turned to part 2. If today there is something more important than reading texts correctly, it is reading society correctly. The screen behind her displayed Rick's 4 arrows: humiliation, education, action, multiplication. "From a marble room where humiliation once happened," she said, "we came to the wooden tables of the library to learn. From apology came action, scholarships, career paths, mentoring hours, and now multiplication." Lucia invited Rick on stage. He walked slowly, tieless. "Today," Rick said, "I sign into being the Lucia Johnson Foundation for Human Dignity with $500 million US, entrusted to an independent board of librarians, community members, scholars, frontline staff. Carmen Johnson as executive director, Dr. Ahmed to lead languages, Mrs. Wang to guide pedagogy, Maria Rossi to connect families. No corporate logos in classrooms, only students' names. A stir in the guest seats. Bradley Carter, an old Summit Club friend, shot up, "$500 million? You've lost your mind." Rick didn't counter with words. He produced the charter, the fund not owned by Sullivan Tech, clauses locked, priorities, frontline scholarships, community languages, service worker career ladders. The company's board chair stepped forward. "The board has approved this as a personal commitment. The firm is not paying." Bradley fell silent, sinking back. Lucia showed no triumph. She returned to her last condition. A foundation won't live unless tied to an open ecosystem. I invite the 3 universities here to sign an MOU. Community credit for library classes. Professors crossing campus gates, library as an open campus. The 3 scholars exchanged glances, then nodded. They signed on stage, blue ink spreading like a new river. Then a man rose in back. "I'm the father of Chloe Green, the girl who didn't win a scholarship. I was angry, but today I understand. Fairness is not a side door, it's a straight road. My child has resources. Many here have never had a chance. I volunteer 2 hours a week mentoring." Beside him, Mark Green, the CFO, Chloe's father, spoke hoarsely. "And I apologize. I once wanted the side door. Now I ask to open the door." The hall rose to its feet. No fireworks, no dramatic music. Just the sound of shoes brushing the wooden floor as people from different walks moved closer. The colloquium ended with a flash class. Lucia invited Bradley Carter up to try 1 minute of Mandarin. "Ni hao," Bradley mispronounced it. The room laughed softly. Lucia didn't mock, she corrected gently. "Ni hao, push the breath." Bradley tried again, right this time. Applause rippled. A harmless moment, but enough to chip away 1 brick of arrogance. Outside, the protest group fell quiet. One still grumbled, but no one answered. Carmen led Lucia past, listening to the wind through the trees like pages turning. "Tired?" she asked. "Tired, but worth it." Lucia smiled. "Tomorrow I still have a vocab test with Dr. Ahmed." They both laughed, the most ordinary laugh of the day. That night, on the 52nd floor cleared of million-dollar paintings, Rick signed the asset transfer into the foundation. Beside him, Carmen reviewed personnel policies, living wage, transparency, community evaluation. Dr. Ahmed drafted language as empowerment curriculum. Mrs. Wang outlined pedagogy without shame. Maria Rossi built the Mother-Child Learning Club. At the table's edge, Lucia chalked 3 rules. Call names right. Listen responsibly. Empower to multiply. Before lights out, Rick opened his grid notebook. He wrote, "Today, no one won. Knowledge, 1, the library, 1, and the children, even the child once inside me, 1. He laid the pen down. The city breathed slower. In that breath were page turns, apologies, greetings in a new tongue, and a promise signed in blue ink. Tomorrow, multiplication would truly begin, and the faint stain on the lobby's defaced poster, kept on purpose, would remind all that dignity isn't something declared once, but a sentence to be read correctly every single day. 1 month after the colloquium, the 52nd floor was no longer a museum of cold stone. The black granite table was gone, replaced with a round wooden one. The walls carried photos of real people. Dr. Ahmed holding chalk, Mrs. Wang among shelves of books, Maria Rossi leading the mother-child class, Amaya reading poetry, Jamal with his robot, Noah smiling shyly at the ferry dock. At the main entrance hung a small sign, "No side door." Carmen Johnson entered the new meeting room with a 90-day program. She didn't use 50 slides, she told the work in plain words. Weeks 1 to 2. Using the right names is mandatory. Name tags, preferred names updated, in email/Slack. Weeks 3 to 6. Mandatory listening circles for managers. 12 people per session. Chairs in a court round. Rules of no interruptions. No excuses. Weeks 7 to 12. Career paths for service staff. From cleaner to safety and ops associate, with evening library classes counted in development records. Ongoing, one-to-one mentoring between employees and scholarship students, 60 minutes per week. Rick took notes. CFO. Mark Green sat quietly, placing a sheet in front of him. I withdraw from all selection panels for 12 months. I request to serve as advisor on impact measurement. The silence in the room wasn't heavy. It felt like breathing space for a man who had just placed a brick in its right spot. To keep the new culture from becoming slogans, Lucia proposed the 3-sentence rule, a mini code of conduct posted in every meeting room. 1. Say the right name. My name is, I like to be called. 2. Listen responsibly. I hear you said. Here's how it affects me, my team. 3. Empower to multiply. What I can do this week is, I need to join me. In a technical meeting, a manager carelessly blurted, "Speak proper English." The room froze. According to the rule, an Indian engineer calmly replied, 1. My name is Anil, pronounced Anin. 2. I heard you say proper English. It made me feel lowered, even though I'm doing my job right. 3. This week, I'll host a session on clear PR writing. I hope you'll try this checklist. No shouting. Behavior corrected behavior. At the ground floor lobby, a new guard slipped into calling Carmen the cleaning lady. Carmen didn't scold. 1. I am Carmen Johnson. 2. I heard you say cleaning lady. It hurt because that's how people called me for 8 years, like I was an object. 3. This week, I'll lead an orientation for security on Say the Right Name. I invite you to join front row. The guard blushed, nodded. The next week, he himself shared a story about misnaming patients in a hospital and the consequences. Lucia expanded language commons. Every Tuesday at the library, beyond Mandarin class, there was now a work chat room, a corner where service employees practiced sample emails with student tutors. On the whiteboard, write to respect the reader. Amaya ran poetry nights. Jamal opened a circuit lab. Noah taught Excel to parents. Maria organized weekend mother-child classes. Multiplication was taking shape. Racism didn't vanish just because of a 3-sentence rule. One morning, a group of black mothers arrived for the mother-child class and a rideshare driver sneered, "Are you sure you're on the right floor?" implying they'd wandered into a rich space. Lucia didn't yell. She invited him in for 5 minutes. Maria Rossi had him hand out vocabulary cards. One mom said, "Thank you for helping." As he left, Lucia handed him the 3-sentence sheet. He read it, sighed. Old habit. I'll help next week. The company's recruiter retrained the driver team that week. Repeated corrections became habits. Meanwhile, Rick faced bullets from the market. A major retail client hesitated to renew, citing, "Our CEO is busy with social activism." Rick's team arrived, no glossy PR slides. They presented data, error rates down, incident response faster due to the listen and fix process, NPS up, recruitment costs lower thanks to retention. Rick said, "We invest in trust because it produces productivity. If you want a supplier chasing short-term cheapness, we're not a fit. If you want a partner resilient against hidden workforce crises, we are. They renewed, not out of pity, out of logic. The roundtable policy was enforced. Every meeting in circle seating, no podium. Each ended with 3 written commitments, per the rule. Some scoffed at first. 3 weeks later, meeting time dropped 18%. Unresolved tasks down 25%. Mark Green chuckled. When we call things by their right names, work moves faster. Another incident. A meme leaked on Slack. An edited picture mocking Lucia with the caption, "Prodigy for hire by the hour." Not obscene, but toxic. IT traced it to an intern. Under the new code, discipline came with repair. 2 weeks unpaid suspension, 3 listening circles, a 1,000-word reflection on microaggression impact, co-authoring with Lucia a guide, How to Joke Without Wounding, and a public apology. The intern agreed, voice shaking at the mic. "I thought it was just a joke. I didn't understand the hurt. I'm sorry." The guide became onboarding material. At the New Jersey satellite plant, the rule was translated into Spanish and Portuguese. There, a Latina worker suggested name pronunciation tags, cards with phonetic spelling. 3 weeks later, mispronunciations dropped sharply. Survey scores of "I feel seen" rose. Carmen said, "Saying the right name doesn't waste time. Saying it wrong costs time to fix." By the 3rd month, Rick replaced the CEO office sign with a small wooden plaque. Round table room. Below, it was a faint pencil mark, cut from the once defaced poster intentionally left. Visitors asked, Rick explained, "We keep the stain to remember that correction is never done." No lofty philosophy, just a habit. At a town hall, a young female engineer stood. "I quit my old job because of racial jokes. Here, for the first time, I see a simple rule that takes the sting out. Thank you for the 3-sentence rule." Applause followed, not thunderous, but steady. At day's end, Rick sat again at table 12. Lucia handed him a page of 10 new classical Chinese lines. He stumbled, stood up again. Mrs. Wang noted, tone 2 lengthen. Ahmed teased, "Every mistake is a rung." Rick wrote in his notebook, "Reading people right is as hard as reading tones right. But with practice, it becomes natural." Carmen watched through the glass and nodded softly. Culture doesn't sprout from speeches. It heals gradually from small habits. 3 words close this chapter. Name, listen, empower. Turns out, those are also the 3 basic tones needed to read a company correctly. 1 year after the public co-reading at the library, the Lucia Johnson Foundation for Human Dignity released its first report. The numbers were not flashy, but they carried weight. 18 libraries in the network, up from 12, across New York City, Newark, Philadelphia, Baltimore. 2,300 regular learners, 61% service workers, 27% parents, 12% students. 310 scholarships, up from 150, with 88% maintaining high GPA, 100% fulfilling the 10 hours per month give back. At Sullivan Tech, service staff turnover down 38%, safety incidents down 41% internal. NPS plus 15 points, walk-in applicants doubled. Rick stood backstage at the New York Public Library's Central Auditorium, adjusting his mic. On stage was the first graduation ceremony of the Service to Operations Career Pathway. 23 employees, once holding MOPS, received Safety and Operations Associate certificates. A Dominican father choked up. "For the first time, my daughter saw my name on a diploma." The hall rose to its feet. Carmen handed out the certificates, pronouncing each name with care. Every name was a rung on the ladder. On the side, Mark Green and his daughter Chloe attended the mentoring session. Chloe, who hadn't won a scholarship the year before, was now mentoring 2 Bronx students, teaching presentation and planning. "I learn more when I teach," she said to Lucia with an easy smile. Lucia grinned back. Teaching is the fastest way to learn. At the back row sat Bradley Carter, old friend from the Summit Club, without cameras. He passed Rick a small card. "I want to anonymously fund $1 million for the Reed Society Right program in Baltimore. Not because he lost a debate, perhaps because no one forced him to go live here, only to read and listen." Rick scribbled back, "Welcome to the round table." The foundation signed MOUs with Columbia, NYU, Fordham for community credits. Professors stepped outside campus gates, classes graded seriously. Learners got library cards like student IDs. A literature professor remarked, "We teach philosophy on campus. At the library, we see philosophy become human." Media grew less harsh. The City Ledger, once mocking, published a mild correction. Measurable impact of language commons. Not a full apology, but enough to cool the air. More important, beneficiaries spoke up. A Jamaican parent wrote, "I sent my first confident email to a teacher thanks to the class. My son said, 'Mom, I'm proud of you.'" At Sullivan Tech, the photo wall thickened. Mentoring pairs, name pronunciation tags, no side door signs in every lobby. The 3-sentence rule was translated into 7 languages. A small supplier in Newark adopted it on their own. After 3 months, they reported lower turnover and fewer customer complaints. "No big slogans needed," they wrote, "just read each other right." Lucia turned 13. She still attended public school, still carried her backpack to Tuesday nights at the library, still corrected Rick's tones. Asked by a reporter, "Who do you want to become?" she answered, "I want to become someone who gets the work done, whatever the title." Names matter when used to respect, not when used to build walls. One afternoon, Rick brought Lucia and Carmen to the 52nd floor, now called the Round Table Room, to sign over major operational powers of the foundation to the independent board. "I step down as foundation chair," Rick said. "Carmen becomes CEO. The board can override my proposals." Carmen looked squarely at him. "And you still sit at the round table each week as a member." Rick nodded. Letting go was a lesson, too. Before signing, Lucia asked to rehang one artifact, the once defaced poster, now framed with the line, "Defaced, repaired, stain kept to remember." Next to it, a handwritten 3-sentence rule from Lucia. At the signing, she read briefly, 1. Say each other's names, that is the front door. 2. Listen responsibly, that is the bridge. 3. Empowered to multiply, that is the long road. Whoever walks these 3 points will reach one another. That night, the auditorium filled for the first scholarship graduation. No fireworks, only warm yellow light. Rick gave a short speech. Lucia had made him cut it down. "I once misread the tones of life. I thought wealth meant right, power meant wise. A black girl in a library taught me that reading people right is the beginning of all wisdom. Thank you to my teachers, Carmen, Lucia, Ahmed, Wang, Maria, and to the mistakes that forced me to relearn." After the program, a group of scholars pulled Lucia aside. "We want to bring language commons to Detroit." Lucia didn't promise loosely. She pulled out an 8-point checklist: partner library, core teaching team, minimum budget, impact metrics. She ended with her mantra, "No company logo, only students' names." Rick's last call that night was to Jamal's mother. She cried, telling him Jamal had just received an internship offer at the MTA. "Nothing certain yet," Rick smiled, "but the road is open." He hung up, looked through the library window at table 12 across the street, where Carmen was grading listening modules and Lucia was correcting a newcomer's tone on Ma. Table 12 didn't belong to him, it belonged to anyone willing to sit and learn. Late at night, Rick opened his grid notebook. On the final page of the year, he wrote 3 lines. "Bullet wealth is making others rich. Strength is lifting the weak to stand. Wisdom is knowing you were once blind and keeping the stain to remember." He closed the notebook. Manhattan quieted, wind pushing clouds across the moon. In the library hall, staff cleared chairs, wiped the floor. A young worker paused at the framed poster, defaced, repaired, stain kept to remember, snapped a photo, and sent it to his mother with the message, "I'm called by my real name at work." Tomorrow multiplication would continue. 1 hour of mentoring, 1 clearer email, 1 properly pronounced hello, 1 decision not to slip through a side door. No grand finale, just the long road. And on that road, the steady voice of a 13-year-old black girl kept echoing. Reading words right, reading people right, reading society right. That is the true legacy. And the stain left on the wall, kept deliberately, will forever remind everyone that dignity is not a declaration once made, but a daily practice. And so runs the journey, from arrogance on the 52nd floor to a small wooden table in a library, where a 13-year-old black girl taught a billionaire that true wealth is found in preserving dignity and opening opportunity. And what about you? If you were in Lucia's place, would you have the courage to stand up for your mother against prejudice and power? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. If this story touched your heart and carried meaning, don't forget to hit like, share it with friends, and subscribe so you won't miss the next video.